you owe us on the shirts. It's going to get a lot of attention. If you could just say in the simplest form to those who are just getting aware of this now, what do you mean by what you owe us?
The players of what is building this brand in this league. There is no league without the players. The new money that's coming in, we feel like we are owed a piece of that pie that we helped to create. So that's basically what that is.
A piece of what pie? The WNBA has been operating in a financial deficit for years. Tens of millions of dollars lost last year. It's quite literally in debt. So you want a piece of what pie, ma'am? There is no pie. Start baking. What do you think the new money coming in and the media attention is going towards? The deficit. By no means am I saying it's specifically y'all's fault, but like I said on X, we see the hard work y'all are putting in. We see the potential, but as soon as things start getting slightly better, y'all go straight back to y'all's old habits. This is what had y'all hemmed up in the first place. Remember when nobody wanted to take any of y'all serious because all they saw was a bunch of whiners that thought they were owed the world. And that was before the media spike. Why are y'all trying so hard to sabotage this thriving relationship like a 31-year-old uncle that's afraid of commitment?
Pay us what you.
Okay. All right. So like I said, let's start off lighthearted. Obviously, as some of you guys might know, the WNBA is currently renegotiating kind of their collective bargaining agreement. One of the things that the players are asking for are higher salaries. There's a lot of pushback against that, but like, what are your thoughts on it, brother? What are your thoughts on the protest? What are your thoughts on Brittany Griner and DeMarcus Cousins, their beef and the whole nine?
So, man, you said lighthearted, and I'm striving my best not to go
light-ish, light
adjacent. Initially, of course, I've been seeing the fodder, surrounding this. If you're on any type of media at all, you see it. And initially, one, I'm like uninterested. And that's not uncommon for me. I get a lot of questions. I have a teenage daughter. She's at the age now where she is very much inquisitive about social issues, even politics and relationship stuff. Like, she's exposed to it now, so she's always asking me. And one of my classic retorts is, I don't. Whenever I'm asked, like, well, what do you think about this? I don't. So that's kind of my initial reaction when somebody says, like, what do you think about WNBA? I don't. Right. But amongst it being forced upon you, not meaning, here, but just in the conversation, okay, one, I'm just uninterested. It's just not an interesting conversation. But if it's going to be forced, right, by proxy of the WNBA, this conversation of equal pay, then let's dive into it. Okay, we're gonna have it. Let's have it. And I think this speaks to to a connection to the main topic of the night about marriage, which is really just human dynamics between men and women. And I think this points to the bigger concept that we have to be very careful and very mindful on giving compromise to some basic ideals. And so the basic ideal that has been compromised that would facilitate the platform for this conversation to even really have any type of legs whatsoever is the idea that men and women are somehow equal, right? They're somehow the same when I say equal, right? Because I do believe that we are of equal value, but equal importance, but not equal roles. And so when we start to compromise on the ideals that we know we're identical, that leads to ridiculous conversations like what is happening here with the WNBA. And so to not be too assumptive that everybody understands and agrees, I think probably most of the audience here understands when I say, this is a ridiculous conversation. Obviously, the WNBA is not even profitable. They lose money. I think, 40, 50 million last year they lost. So, to even try to draw a comparison of we should get paid more or closer to the males. Like, no, the NBA is subsidizing and it's responsible for the mere existence of the WNBA. So how will we even be at the point where this is even a national conversation, that it even is given any thought? It's because we on the macro have compromised the ideals that men and women are somehow identical. And that's how we got to this point in the first place. And that's also what has, chipped away at the institution of marriage, as we'll get to later. But that's kind of the core thing that jumps out to me about this is like, I'm kind of unbothered because it's a natural deduction to me. Like, yeah, well, in a society that pretends as if men and women are identical, this seems like a natural byproduct that would come up. As ridiculous as it is, that's my kind of conclusion.
Why do you think, and this is a conversation I've had with several women, but like, why do you think there's such a push to kind of standardize men and women, like to make us the same, to in this case, Brittany Griner is dribbling a basketball, DeMarcus Cousins is dribbling a basketball, therefore they should be paid the same. Why do you think there's such a big push for that?
Because we have reached a point where we have so tamed the world that we can even have these type of arguments and conversations. The closer we get to a primitive environment, less that anything like that even comes up, because the lack of identical nature amongst men and women is amplified when you're in a primitive environment. If you're in the middle of Ukraine right now, and the women are getting up out of there, and the men have to stay and fight, right? If you were in the wilderness and the men have to be the ones that help us survive, it will be evident that we're not the same. But that's not the environment that we live in. And so one, we've created a condition from that standpoint, and two, I think as men we've created the condition from a macro, which, let me sidebar here and say, we have to really make distinctions between macro points and micro points. Macro points and micro points, because often when we start talking about responsibility, and we can be having this conversation from macro, hey, it's our responsibility as men, then a lot of times, particularly young men, I hear them taking this as, it's not my fault, I'm not responsible. Now you're having a micro conversation, right? So with that context understood, on the macro as men, what we did was we did not hold up in esteem and regard the equally demanding and equally important role of women as mothers and wives. And so it would seem natural that they would want to liberate themselves from the duties that we didn't hold in high enough esteem. We don't hold in high enough regard. You hear it in conversations even now when people say things like just a stay-at-home mom, right? She's just at home all day. And some of that is like we haven't really understood and appreciated the work and the value that brings. And so when you do that on a macro over a period of decades, then of course, well, yeah, I want to liberate myself for that, and I want to take on the more exciting and appealing roles. It seems like that the male-dominated society appreciates. So we're left in this type of environment.
That's a good point. I want to segue that into the Travis Hunter, the recent the recent update with the Travis Hunter situation. So I'm gonna play this video real quick.
You're a great woman. You'll know he's gonna make you great by how you suffer. The greater the glory, the more intense the story. Because you can't get this all out of a book. God gets ready to make you a great woman. You'll know he's going to make you great by how you suffer. The greater the glory, the more intense the story. Because you can't get this all out of a book. I'm just ready to make you a great woman.
All right. So this Travis Hunter situation is something we've been talking about for over a year now, just collectively as a society, more specifically Black men. Before we really go into it, why do you think this has been such an important thing for Black men to lean into just across the board?
That begs the question of, do I think it is that
Do
important?
you think it is? Yeah, there we go. Do you think it is? And if you do, why? If you don't, why not?
Yeah. Again, this could be just, part of how I tend to approach a lot of these things. Like, what do you think about? Well, I don't. Okay, but now if I'm forced to, then I will give my thoughts. The reason why I don't is because overall, the lifestyle of celebrities, athletes, actors, entertainers, while there can be something to be gleaned from it as just macro examples and you can take lessons away from anything, right? A wise person can learn more from a foolish question than a fool can learn from a wise answer. So we can use anything as a teaching moment. Simultaneously, there's so many dynamics and externalities when it comes to people in a lot of these situations, whether it's Travis Hunter or Will Smith or this celebrity or Future and Rihanna and Russell. Their life is just so different. And there's so many different dynamics that aren't even remotely relative to what most of us are dealing with. This is one where really for healthy conversations, I like to get more micro than macro, right? The kind of reverse where if I'm having a conversation with a young man and he's, pointing to a Travis Hunter situation, I'm like, okay, that's cool. Let's talk about your situation. Like, why is your situation the way it is? And oftentimes it has absolutely nothing to do with the Travis Hunter type of dynamic. So I don't think it's very important from that standpoint. And then also, I've seen the conversation and it's pretty universal and pretty obvious. Anybody with a remotely functioning level of discernment can see we kind of come to the same conclusions, right? Like, even as the pro marriage person here, the advocate that's going to give my arguments for marriage later, yeah. I'm like, this is not what I would advise or recommend. So, that the one thing that I've taken away from this, and I've kind of argued from the pro marriage side of things is, don't like, we don't want to wear that. Like, the marriage side, I'm like, whoa, this is not. Why are we pointing to this as the example, right? Because we've had kind of some back forth. You like, see, this is marriage. I'm like, whoa, that ain't got nothing to do with marriage. This is not what we're advocating for, even though it's on the pro marriage side of things. And so, those are kind of my thoughts. But I'm interested to know your I kind of know where you land on kind of the broader Travis Hunter, situation. But I'm interested to know the value you see in this on the macro conversation standpoint.
Yeah, man. So I was having a conversation with my little brother. It's had to be like a week ago, and basically, he was trying to figure out which of two girls he should really like put his time and effort into. And the first girl, let's call her girl A. Girl A, apparently, like, they have a good connection, good energy, but she seems to be very busy, right? And then girl B, according to him, like, she's coming off the top, like, I like you, like, it's clear as day, there's no ambiguity, etc. So I told him, I remember this clip of this pimp. He was like, don't go with the girl you like, go with the girl who like you. So I told him that, but I also like, they take that with a grain of salt because, um, as individuals, we have desires too. And there's a middle ground. There's a middle ground of where you get what you want. And you also are in a position where you could protect yourself. Your nose isn't too wide open, et cetera. So for me, I think it's important because it serves as a case study for young men who aren't as experienced in navigating women, experience in distinguishing between the women worth navigating, right? Because the truth is, growing up, we're taught what to be for women, not to what to expect from women, right? So, a lot of the conversation we see, even in the manosphere, men in their 40s, 50s, 60s, a lot of that is the consequence of coming to these realizations late and coming to these realizations alone, right? So when they see a Travis Hunter who is going down a certain path that they might have gone down or they might have tiptoed, it's for lack of a better term, it's triggering, right? So from the perspective of like offering Black men catharsis, I think these conversations are important. From the perspective of offering Black boys perspective that has never really been offered to men throughout history, because we're supposed to assume that women are like default good. I think is a positive. As far as their situation specifically, I don't care as much because we don't know the ins and outs. But all we can do is speculate based on the information we have available. And, like I said before, based on the information we have available, it's not looking too good.
My go-to. I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt till I doubt the benefit, and
That's
it ain't
right.
much benefit of the doubt as much as we don't know the specifics.
That's right.
Benefit of the doubt has run out. There's an interesting connection and dynamic of you bringing up the conversation. You said, was it your cousin, your brother?
My little brother.
Your brother. Interesting, dynamic there of like how like he's coming to you for that advice, and you kind of give him some game. I think those are the moments and opportunities to like actually like dig in deeper, because one of my axioms for marriage when it's done properly is that we're not suited to vet for ourselves. And so you kind of touched on a lot of that, of like not having the game and things of that nature. And so I think this is one of the mistakes, is that we'll see a situation like the Travis Hunter and we try to approach the education from like a macro standpoint. But here's one of the things we understand about human nature, right? Is everybody got all the answers for somebody else. We all got the answers for everybody else. We can look at somebody else's situation. We can look at his situation and be like, that's crazy. I would never do it. But even guys watching the stream right now, that them and they boys always like, yo, he crazy. He a simp. He this, I would never do that. They probably have a boy that's singing that same tune about Travis Hunter that actually has his nose wide open in a similar fashion about a girl when he was actually in the situation. Right. So sometimes you can't see the picture because you're the one in the frame. And it's in those moments where you need somebody that is detached, emotionally detached from the situation, that's actually in your sphere and in your circle to put you on game. Like we most of us have seen a dude that, and it's in our group, in our friend circle, it's like, bro, like it's obvious she don't mean you no good, bro. She ain't the one. Man, y'all bugging. Like we have Travis Hunters amongst us. Maybe not to the degree,
not to that extent,
not to that extent, but the avatar, some lower version of it. But as a whole, we have an idea of how we mate that it is up for individuals to go select, and I think that's a flawed concept. Like I don't think we're really suited to vet and select for ourselves, at least not entirely.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think a big part of this too that we don't really touch on enough, but men are generally thought of, whether overtly or covertly, men are generally thought of as disposable, right? So men, from the perspective of a lot of women, unfortunately, don't really deserve much, right? And should be grateful for whatever they get, right? So I think that's where the I am the table comes in. That's where you should be grateful that she comes in. And I think that, this new generation of men and boys that are being called sassy, that are being called, every name in the book. I think this is the first time in history where men are having to renegotiate who they are outside of being sacrificial. Right. And I think there's some growing pains with that. There are growing pains amongst men, but also growing pains amongst women trying to reconceptualize this new group of men who actually have expectations, not just like the transactional expectations of you cook and you clean and I give you money, but no, I need to feel loved by you as well. I need to feel honored by you as well. Like I don't know if you remember the video I sent you about the difference between media tropes of the eligible bachelor back in the day versus now. Right, back in the day, it was the James Bonds, it was the dudes from Greece who were so cool and smooth talking, etc., that they could go and charm any woman. But today, the popular archetype is the on TV, it's the reachers. It's the if you're on Instagram, TikTok, or even YouTube, King 6'8" the Great. The guy who just builds himself up to the level where all he has to do is stand, and the women will come to him, right? And that's I think for me that's a big indicator of the paradigm shifting to, instead of focusing on gaining the attributes that are going to charm women and the wit and all that good stuff, become the man of her dreams, and she will come to you, which is also, I think, a heartbreaking realization for a lot of men, because we were taught that that's not how women operated, right? Women operated based on, feelings, and based on not how you look, but how you make her feel, et cetera, et cetera. So when the movies came out that showed that you can be the guy next door and get the girl next door who was way more attractive than you, that was an inspiring paradigm. Whereas today, it doesn't really work like that, because she wants the top dude. She wants the guy who's 6'8" and got a jawline and all that good stuff. So, I mean, how do you think that's going to affect the future of not just male-female dynamics, but also long-term male-female dynamics like marriage?
Well, so this is an area where I am very, very inquisitive.
Let's go.
Because, when we talk about the different realities, right? Like, the three levels of realities that I'll point out are, the unseen reality, the seen reality, the physical reality, and then the virtual reality, right? And the one that's the most real is actually the unseen reality, right? Not to get too metaphysical or spiritual or deep or anything of that nature, but even just from a scientific standpoint, everything that we see right now in the physical world, wherever you are, whatever you can touch, it's made up of something that is unseen. Atoms, right? We're all an assortment of atoms. Everything that you've seen from an invention standpoint, it was unseen. It was imagined in somebody's mind first, right? The phone, the computers, everything was imagined. It was in the unseen before it was in the scene. So if the unseen preceded the scene, it's more real. So you got the unseen reality, then you got the physical reality. One of the common phrases nowadays, right, is, man, go touch grass. You spending too much time, right, on like go touch grass. Like, we need to spend more. Get outside, like actually go, like, interact with people. Like, what is your reality actually saying to you? We know there's so much conversation around, like, the alphabet community, for instance, and it's it's important conversation to have, and it's real discuss. But sometimes it gets so heavy that you think, like, wait a minute, like is this like 20 or 30% of the population now that is identifying as the opposite gender that they were assigned at birth? I'm even trying to be careful because I don't know what the algorithms are like nowadays. I don't want to put your channel no type of thing, but as ridiculous as some of it is, in educating my daughter, I had to, like, at some point, you know, it's like, hey, listen, I know you're hearing all this stuff. How many people do you know like that in real life? How often do you actually see that in the real world? And she's like, oh, well, I mean, like, maybe, yeah, we've seen it before at the mall or something like, but like, I don't really run into, like, yeah, right. But if you're spending so much time in virtual reality, it seems like it's just everywhere, right? So my point in breaking down these realities is I'm really inquisitive and wondering how much outside is reflective of the virtual reality. Because by all means, in virtual reality, it very much, you know, seems that way. It's not lost on me that the virtual reality is making an effect in the real world, but I wonder how pronounced that is. I'm inquisitive about that. I do coach, you know, youth sports, you know, wrestling, you know, youth track. And so, you know, I'm around teenage kids. You know, my daughter's a teenager. I'm around some of it. And I do still see some, you know, mating and kids being kids relative to, you know, of course, there's always differences generationally, but for the most part, the same way that I was in high school, flirting and like each other and things of that nature. So sometimes I wonder, like, yo, outside ain't as deep as, you know, the virtual reality is. But the more if you get sucked into virtual reality and that becomes your reality, I think that may be like a bigger part of the issue. And then again, I say that all with the caveat of not trying to diminish or downplay that things are shifting. And that's where the inquisitive part comes in. I know it has been a shift, but I'm really curious as how much is it really? And that I don't know.
That's actually a conversation I have a lot with with the women in my life, because that's something that comes up a lot, particularly like in criticism of the online male space, right? And in my opinion, I think what's happening is if we were to compare today, for instance, with 50 years ago, I think this is one of the first times in history where kids have to, kids have to actually struggle with analysis paralysis, right? What am I going to be when I grow up is a more daunting question, I think, than it's ever been, right? Back in the day, your dad was a farmer, you're going to be a farmer. Your dad was a mechanic, you're going to be his intern or his apprentice, and you're going to be a mechanic, right? There were pre-carved paths for you. You lived during the Industrial Revolution, you're going to go work at the Ford factory, right? So from a rumination standpoint, I don't think there was our parents and grandparents had the latitude to ruminate the way that we do today. The good thing about, or the bad thing about it, let me start there. The bad thing about it is they were limited in their options, right? The good thing about it is they were limited in their options, right? And I bring that up because whatever it is that we're talking about in the manosphere, whatever it is we're talking about on the internet, even some of the nonsense we see on TikTok, I think that this is how people actually feel. I think the difference is this is the first time in history where how you feel can be greater than the program. Back in the day, how you feel was second to the program, right? You were black, so you were in solidarity with whatever black was at that time. You were a part of the Nation of Islam. You were from the South. But now, because we've so embraced individuality, the nuances of human rumination and, you know, people trying to stand out from this more connected, larger world that we have access to, means that it's easier to be more brash and more authentic and more sincere with how you really feel about things. And I think that's what's happening. I think because of that, this is the first time in history where we actually have an opportunity to work things out. Because back in the day, people felt like that, but there were so many limiters, if you will, that kept those things from bubbling to the surface. But now those limiters no longer exist. So all you can do is ruminate and then find communities to ruminate with. Whatever you're ruminating about, there are communities now for even the philias, right? So I don't think it's because it's not as real as the internet would let us believe. I just think the internet has given us permission to be our authentic selves, for better or worse. And I think because of that, we're gonna have to deal with things we've never had to deal with before.
Yeah, so I have a challenge to that idea of us being more of ourselves. You make some very, very powerful points about the limit of options, and the word that came to mind as you were talking about, the good thing for them is they had limited options, and the bad thing for them is they had limited options, is understanding that we want options to a limit. All right. We want options to a limit. And when you have too many options, it actually creates anxiety. Right. Like, we could take a woman that's, shopping for, a purse, or better yet, let's say shoes.
Yeah.
She wants some options. Right. But if she finds a cute pair of shoes and she loves the style, I mean, it's the perfect style, and they have like 4 or 5 colors, perfect. But if that same pair, beautiful pair, and it's got 48 colors or combos of colors, that's not as enjoyable of an experience, because you get that analysis paralysis of, say her budget, she, can only, get one, right? And now it's like, I want this color or that color or that color, like, analysis is not as fun of an experience. It creates anxiety. And so this illusion of options from the virtual world, because everything you're seeing out there is not really an option for you. You might think it is.
Sure.
We get sucked into it. There's a really deep, evil, nature to social media that I'll strive not to go too deep into. But this illusion that it draws us in actually makes us more separated. Right? Or we're connected. Like, you got all these friends and followers, but you feel more alone.
Yeah.
And so the challenge to the idea of we're being more of who we are, or are we just being more of the echo chambers that we find ourselves in, and how much time do we actually spend in our own inner world? See, the more inner work you do, the better results you can have in the outer world. But are we really doing inner work if we're never actually spending time with ourselves, even though we're spending a lot of time with ourselves? We're spending a lot of time just by ourselves. We're not as connected as we used to be, because the illusion, the fabricated version of connection through the virtual world and devices. And then you find yourself in these silos because you're just accepting ideas that were impressed upon you. You didn't land on that idea. You didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on you. You just got followed down the trail of recommendations in your algorithm that led you to accept that thought outside of you. So is that really more of who you are? You don't even spend time with yourself. How do you know? And so then you end up in this echo chamber where, when everybody thinks alike, nobody thinks. That's why, like, these conversations are so, healthy, and what you're doing with your, content and channel is so healthy in the internet space, because it is about actually having conversation, actually challenging ideas, your own and others, unpacking your own, like this deep level of conversation. That's not what's happening out in the internet world for the most part. And so I don't know that people really are, discovering more of who they are, as much as they're just follow, if you just throw a dead fish into a stream, it's just going to follow the path of the stream. Right. So.
Yeah, I think that's where it gets tricky, right? Because I think if you were to like travel in time, like let's say 60 years ago, and you were to ask people what they wanted, they might tell you some version of what today is. However, they wouldn't have the insight or the wherewithal to also conceptualize the cons, right? Because in my opinion, I think human nature is discontent. I think human nature is constantly, the good part about it is we're constantly not satisfied, so we're striving for better. The bad part about it is we're constantly not satisfied, so we're striving for better. And sometimes better is not always good, right? So, I imagine that, like today we see TikTok videos of women talking about, I married a great, wonderful man, but I want a divorce. I imagine there were women like that in the 40s, but there was no space to be that level of authentic. There was no confirmation around. There were no communities. There was no video on TikTok to validate this primitive, very, very fleeting human thought that came into her mind, right? Like, we now make the distinction between like what is it called? What is the term for like when you're driving on the road and some part of your brain is like just swerve off the road. There's a term for that.
Okay. I'm not familiar with the term.
Yeah,
I
it's
concept of what you're saying.
It'll come to me, but basically, I
is it
think,
similar to the urge when you're at heights to jump
to
off?
jump off? Yes,
Right.
yeah. It's something thought, but
Yeah.
the point is, I think that as we've become more inclusive, as we've become more tolerant, as we've become more permissive, as we make safe spaces for different ways of thinking and being, and as we continue to like explore the human condition, I think intrusive thoughts, God bless you. I think what the internet is, for better or worse, is the manifestation of that existential angst. Now, in these spaces, we tend to talk about it primarily as it, manifests amongst women, and you can never make them happy, and you're gonna buy her a car and she gonna leave you for the mechanic. We talk about it from that perspective, but I think there's a larger conversation about how the internet, how even AI now, we're talking about it, is really just exposing the underbelly of human nature.
Yeah, man. We
Take it
I
there,
think we
brother.
well past the light. I think we well past the light part of it, right? Because now
Take
you
it
start
there.
talking about the underbelly of human nature.
The underbelly.
When you working back to the woman 60 years ago, that had the same displeasure from having it all, and you talk about this human nature aspect of it's never enough, and the pros and the cons to that. I mean, answers have been around for millennia as to what that is. Will Smith has a clip going around that.
I don't know if we could be quoting Will Smith no more. He didn't.
This is one where it was like, man, so close, but yet so far. He was like right there, but he didn't. And, there's a clip where he's talking about how at the height of heights, it's similar to the low of lows.
Yeah.
You familiar with this clip I'm talking about here?
Yeah.
Where he's like, I wish everybody could just get an experience of having all of the money and having all of the fame and access. Andrew Tate, talked about, the experience of having a private jet, and how, to your point, people at that time, they might wish they could have some of the things now, but they couldn't conceptualize the cons that come with it. So, you might think you want a private jet. That would be awesome to be able to be at any point in the world within a couple hours. And he was talking about what you don't think about is how wherever you are is never satisfying enough, because no matter how awesome where you are is, I could be anywhere else.
Yeah.
Right. And these are the things we don't think about. And so it comes to this fleeting idea in our nature, hedonic adaptation, where we get to a level that's going to make me happy. I'm here. When I get here, that's going to make me happy. And then I actually get here and I'm happy for a while, but then I adapt to this is my new comfort level. You always wanted that car. That was your dream car. And then you get it and it's awesome. And the dopamine and the endorphins, everything is like you get that sensation from being in a car. And then after a while, it's just my car.
Mm-hmm.
And now I need the next, I wanted a luxury car. Now I want an exotic car, right? And it never ends. And so that's what Will Smith is talking about. And so he says at some point you have to go in and realize that the thing that you were searching for all the time was just like self. And that's where I think he was like, man, you're so close, but so far, because it's not self, right? That there's a text that's, thousands of years old that talks about how chasing any of this is going to be vanity. Whether it's, tremendous amount of wealth is going to be, fleeting. It's for nothing. It's vanity. Sexual exploits, it's vanity. Wisdom. If I just, maybe it's just searching wisdom. It's vanity. And until you get to a point where you realize that fulfillment is never going to come from those type of things. Right. So that is a part of our nature, but I think it's to lead us to understanding that fulfillment doesn't come from the hedonic nature and the vapidness of chasing self-pleasure. That's not where fulfillment is going to ever come from. So that thought has been around and explored for millennia.
Yeah, for sure. Let's play this clip right here, and then let's get full steam into the marriage conversation.
Let's do it.
So number one, whoever is in charge of Coldplay's PR should be making a whole bunch of money, because this is excellent. They're calling it the Coldplay cam. Excellent PR. You actually are the one.
I wonder what their streams are right now. I would love to see.
Man, and they didn't have to die. They didn't have to die to get that spike, because usually it's after the artist passed. That's when people go back and listen. So hey, it's brilliant. But so like I said, you're actually the one who sent me that, and that's in reference to the astronomer CEO and the head of HR. Apparently, they had an affair going on, and they were caught at a Coldplay concert, and now people are reenacting that moment and kind of making fun of it. But there's been a lot of conversation around what happened, around infidelity, around I've heard guys say they don't even want their women working in corporate America because the rates and the likelihood of infidelity are so high. What are your thoughts on this bit of current events? And, how do you think it relates to the conversations people are having around marriage?
Yeah. See, and this is one that is a high profile scenario that I think is probably a little more valuable, right? Because while he was a CEO, she was C-suite. It's outside of, celebrity. It's closer to like, okay, what more people will actually have a similar experience to. And first, let me say this, man. A lot of these conversations are sadly reflective of the degradation of our society on a human element standpoint. And so we try to see ourselves as very logical and analytical and breaking things down, but we lose a lot of compassion. And so that's something I see missing in this conversation, is just the compassion of how we even respond to stuff. And I smiled, I laughed, I sent that to you. Like I get the humor element of it, but then I saw like a screenshot of her saying please stop. Like these are actually families, like they actually have children that have to go to school. There are spouses involved. It's rightfully so. Some people are pointing out like everybody's talking about the CEO, but what about cheating on his wife and her? But what about the other man, right? And so like imagine that man, right? Who we don't know the dynamics. You know, I know a lot of times, you know, when the man cheats, is like, well, what did he do, right, to call it a cheat? So, you know, well, did he cheat first? I don't know. We don't know the dynamics, right?
Yeah.
But we do know that his wife was having an affair, and it's now national fodder for everybody. And so, one, just on my thought is just on public discourse. I just wish we had a higher level of compassion, you know, in you know, conversations and things around this. But the internet go internet. We understand that. So that's one thing that comes to mind. Secondly, to the point that you ended on, like, you know, having conversations with men that don't want their wives working in corporate. I would be one of them.
I'm one of them.
I'm one of them ones.
Right,
I want to reckon like this is. I don't know if we said it on.
You did.
Black marriage. Oh,
yeah. That was a little oop for you.
Yeah, there it is. So that, which leads into, you know, some of my arguments like for more traditional marriage. Like, let's just call it what it is. And I understand some of the dynamics and the challenges economically now that we face that other men in the past didn't. So we can address all of that and unpack it. And I'm all about looking for solutions for that, because trust me, I got a wife, 4 kids. Is economically, you know what I'm saying? It is no joke. I absolutely understand and get that. Simultaneously, what you're doing is you're farming your wife out for a check. If she's working in corporate, it just is what it is. And like, I didn't marry my wife because I wanted. I think I said it this way. If it's gonna be another man that tell her what to do, get on her nerves, you know, and boss her around, it's gonna be me, right? It's not gonna be some other man. And so for 8 hours a day, if she has a job, like, it's another man. Tell her. I just can't fathom. Me personally, I can't fathom the concept of not only one, it happening, but 2, me being okay with it happening. That my wife, if one of my children is ill and needs some help, she has to ask another man, can she go take care of my child?
Yeah.
Right. So, and this is not to say I don't respect that. If that's the situation and you have to like, hey, this is where we are economically, I just got you, like, you have to work. But for you to be like, just relegate yourself to that and say, well, it does is normal. I don't understand that, because my wife did work for a time frame and she actually was harassed at work verbally, you know, like saying little slick stuff.
Yeah.
And we needed her check at the time. Right. So if a man's in that situation, like, I get it, but I don't get how, I'm in this situation and I'm okay with it. That's weird to me. I would never just relegate, you know, to that. And that goes to other things. I wanted her to raise my children so they can we can inculcate the values that I have. We talk in our community about the school to prison pipeline, but yet you want to go send your kids to the school, and we complain about the school to prison pipeline. Like, why? Like, on my wife to homeschool. So I have that, you know, that's another train of thought that comes to mind. It's like, yes, this is what happened when your wife is in the corporate world, and you know, in certain positions, I do think there are certain career fields and avenues and environments that are more conducive. If she does have to work outside of the home, it's more conducive and safer. But if she gets up every day, puts on her best, you know, this is a weird phrase. I don't know if women still say it now, but I remember being a phrase back in the days, like, yeah, I got to take my face off. You know, and then, like, taking your makeup off at the end of the night.
Yeah.
Like, so you getting done up to go out somewhere else, and then when you come home, you're putting on sweats, tying your hair up, and taking your makeup off. And I come home, and you know, you're not seeing me in my best self. You know, out and where I'm, you know, making things happen in the corporate space or whatever. You're in an environment all day where you're seeing this man is in a high power position. He's suited and booted, smelling good. He's got authority. He's got power, you know, and you don't even get to see the frivolous sides of his home life, leaving his drawers on the floor too. And, you know, you don't got to go in the bathroom after he just came out. Like, you're not experiencing any of those. Duh. Like, this is duh. That's where, you know, a lot of affairs are going to, you know, take place. We've seen it, you know, my wife and I, we've seen it happen amongst people that, you know, that we know. So to me, it all advocates more of a traditional path and way of doing, marriage.
Yeah, and that's kind of been a big part of you and I's conversation about the institution. Because a big critique that I've had is I think that and it's something that you've also acknowledged. There have to be very specific parameters in place for it to work in a modern context, right? Because even if you are the guy who is super enthusiastic and super idealistic about your wife, you being your wife's only boss, a lot of the zeitgeist is encouraging, is pushing, incentivizes, glorifies women for having it all, for also being a boss and also being, a mother and et cetera, and et cetera. So a lot of women have ironically found their identity in their ability to have a job, work a career, follow their passion, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of deprogramming necessary to even get to that point, because I imagine there are some guys who actually actualize that, but the entire time the wife was unfulfilled, and that played out however it ended up playing out, because she did it, but she, in the back of her mind, she wanted to be in her career. She resented her man, and as soon as she got the opportunity to dip her toe back in the pool, she like, oh, this is what it is, and now her nose wide open. So it ends up being like a delicate line. I think men are being forced to walk, and I think that's what's leading a lot of men to deciding not to walk it at all. Especially if you're a guy who wants a more traditional home dynamic.
Yeah, I think this is what it requires us to look back more intelligently and more critically. And I just look at the macro and the big pictures of looking back, like looking at some of the fine tunes, right? Elements like, say things were 80% better or 90% better back then. Well, okay, that's great. Study the 80 to 90%. When, and when I was in sports, and we were, I was a wrestler studying film, you watch a guy, see what he's good at. If he's like, man, this guy's solid, he's good, I'm still looking for, wait a minute, I found the one crack. When he steps right here, too much weight is on that front foot. Okay, got it. I'm still looking for the crack, the breakdown, the deficiency. And so while they had a lot of things right, they weren't perfect. Like, obviously, we know this. But why aren't we looking more critically at, okay, that was nice. Things were a lot better, more desired outcomes of our relationships dynamics. But what did they have wrong? Where was the weaknesses that we can, build upon and strengthen? I think we'd be served to do some of that, because, I think there's a lot to glean from that to solve the issues. So instead of just looking forward, like, okay, well, we're here now, we're not getting the desired outcomes, let's just look forward. Maybe we spend some time looking back as well, and breaking down the tape of like, well, what led us, to get to this point.
What do you think are some standout principles that could translate today from looking or could apply today from that, that look back?
Great. So even as where we just left off about like, okay, she's unfulfilled. And so we like put into a box what traditional is like, she's just sitting at home, or she's just at home, or she's not working. Well, wait a minute. She doesn't have to work outside of the home to still work and still be fulfilled, and still, particularly when we factor for the changing dynamics of the world we live in. And when the internet can be used, positively, right? Like your grandmother, 60, 70 years ago, like, great grandmother, whoever, didn't really have viable options to have
Right.
Virtual business that she's building from home, in the hours of, 8 to 11, 7 to 11, after, the kids get home from school, she gets their homework, and after husband comes on, she does dinner, nights and weekends, the global business. Like that wasn't even really an option. You know what I mean? So this idea of being able to contribute and facilitate, and man, I just saw a social media reel where maybe you sent it to me. The young lady was asked, like, what value do you bring, for your future husband? She was like, well, I'm studying things right now, like trading and real estate, to where I can help multiply my man's, income.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, she could pair and mate with a man that's in a profession, whether he's a teacher, a truck driver, or, a businessman, white collar, blue collar, doesn't matter. And it's like, okay, hey, I can trade. And so I still have an area of fulfillment where I don't have to necessarily do it in the confines of getting up every single day at old dark 30 to go somewhere I don't want to go, to do something I don't want to do for somebody I don't want to do it for, in an environment that is more conducive to lead to an affair. Why can't she help you, in your early mid 20s, boom, y'all got a rental property. You work, she does the, property management. And then you get a second one, then a third one. And by the time you're in your mid 30s, 40s, you got several different doors, because she was doing that because you work full time. So there's so many different, ways for us to realize and look back and say, okay, if they didn't feel like they, were able to contribute and fully utilize all their gifts, how do I, as a man and a husband and a leader of our family, create a vision large enough that has room for her to actualize her gifts inside of my covering? Like, oh, you got a gift in this arena? Well, what can you do? Well, how can you use that for the family's business, not some other man's empire? How can you use that here?
Yeah, I think what makes it tough is, I think we underestimate propaganda, the power of propaganda. And a lot of the propaganda that I think is an overcorrection born from the neo-feminist movement in particular is that it's not valid unless you do it on your own as a woman, right? Because now there's like a pushback against this notion that a woman who gains success or who gains it all, it was because she was boosted up by a man. But a lot of the popular stories that are coming out are kind of idealizing the woman who got it on her own, right? And I think, unfortunately, a lot of women feel a need to do it themselves, which causes a pushback against, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt pushback against a man providing structure, a man providing those opportunities, right? A man providing leadership even. And it's paradoxical because women are also asking for leaders, but also pushing back against leader type traits from men, which I think is what makes things so hard to navigate, because, men were primed to be that way at our best. The man who covers, the man who guides, the warrior teacher, all that good stuff. But it also seems like that's not the archetype that's being celebrated. Like, matter of fact, I saw a video today. A girl was saying that if you come across a guy with a skincare routine, or a guy who has accent furniture, that you shouldn't trust him, right? Like, give me the dude with the ashy knuckles. And basically her rationale was, he had a good woman in his life at some point, and she's gonna pop up during your relationship. And basically, she was also covertly saying she's not really confident in her ability to meet that standard. And that's something we have to deal with. Like, a lot of women are being primed to get it out the mud, if you will, because it feels more, it's like diamonds to them. Like if it comes out of dirt, it's real. Versus if it's in the lab, it's fake. If it was given to you, it's fake. If it was, if you were being sheltered while you got it, is fake. And that's something young men are going to have to navigate that men never had to navigate before. I mean, how would you encourage them, or what is the wisdom from times past that apply to navigating this new reality?
Yeah, so definitely into an area that I know we've had many a back and forth on it.
Yep.
And you said young men. And so I think everything you said is real and becomes more real the older a woman gets. And so if I have to fight a monster, I want to fight it while I was a baby. Let that breathe for a second. If I gotta fight a monster, why am I gonna feed the monster? Yeah, like, nah, I ain't gonna fight this monster right now. Let me give it, you know what I'm saying, another 3-5 years to get fed, to get stronger. Like, why? So to the young brothers out here, this is something that you're combating, but whenever you defer something, it typically multiplies. You defer your health challenges, it multiplies. You defer, you know, I'm not going to pay now and pay later. The payment multiplies, right? So if you don't address, the sooner you address it, the easier it is to address it. Right? Like, how often have we delayed on doing something and then we do it like, yo, that wasn't even as bad. Like, I should have been did this, right? And so in some very, very safe parameters, when you build yourself up to be a man ready to mate select earlier on, the one key component that jumps out to me in regards to this specific conversation right here is vision. Like, don't underestimate the power of having a strong vision, a clear vision, and even if it's aspirational, don't underestimate the power of humans' ability to connect with a vision that they can see themselves in and really just jump on board and want to be a part of that. And so if you have a vision for a type of life that you want to build when you're younger, this is one of the things that I had even as a young man, you know, with my wife is like, hey, like, I didn't just accidentally land here to have a wife that's at home, and I also work from home, and we homeschool our children. I was talking about this when I was 23 years old, before I was married, when I didn't have any children.
Yeah.
And I was, you know, broke or whatever. And this is what I'm saying, yo, I don't know how different it is, because when I first met my wife, she was on that boss chick energy. Yeah. She'll tell you. She's on that boss chick. And see, so people see like a version of you now, and like it's hard to see, like, what? Nah, you know, she was all about one of the pivotal conversations. And my wife's amazing, by the way, y'all. So don't get twisted. I'm just giving you the context. She'll tell you. One of the pivotal conversations when we were in college, we met in college, just talking hypothetically about the man she was going to marry and the ring that he would get. And she would have all this emphasis on, it's going to be this many carats, and it's going to be princess cut with baguettes on the side. And I was, the 19-year-old me was like, yo, what's she on? Like, what? Yeah. And I was like, yo, what if the man is this with the whoop? And so we understand this, man, and we talk about in our relationship conversations, like, all these rules that a woman have, if you're him for her, she got all these rules. They don't matter for certain men. And so it got to a point where I was him. The ring she was talking about, trust me, that ain't the ring I got. Right? And so as we started to connect and you know, I had a vision that, you know, we kind of collectively, you know, like bought into and saw what was possible for the type of life we could build. Like, she bought into that from an aspirational standpoint of like, yo, here's where I'm going. Here's what we can do. And here's where you can fit inside of that. Like, that's what I'm on. you want to come. You cannot underestimate that with young women, right?
Yeah.
Like the older they get, then the more aspirational something is. I think kind of they're rightfully so. It's like, yo, I'm not dating potential when I'm 33, 37. You know, the woman that's 30. I get it. I get it. Why you like, yo, you still talk about aspirational, you know, potential. But when you like, yo, I'm 20, I'm 22. Like, yeah, I just graduated. You can like that is actually to your advantage at that point. And when don't listen to what they say. A lot of that stuff they talking that, you know, I want this. When they hear a better alternative and you exude confidence in that, confidence isn't just something you have, it's also something you give. Right? Like people confide in you, like when you speak with assertion, authority, and confidence, right? It gives her a certain level of confidence. Like, yo, forget what I was talking about. That sounds better.
You know, and you know, I think that's what makes it complicated because you made a fantastic point. Women make rules for men they don't like. That's a fact, right? Women will circumvent whatever rules or standards they have for a man that she likes, that she, to your point, is him, right? And I think this is evidenced by the King 6'8", the great videos where he's just standing around and women who would never talk to a dude will walk up to him and try to shoot their shot, right? What makes it tough though, and I think this is the point that certain parts of the manosphere make, is women's sexual marketplace peak. If we're using the economic model of like mating and dating, is between like 18 and 25. That's their peak. Because of the internet, because of Instagram, because of TikTok, because of even OnlyFans, they are very aware. They are more aware than ever on the different ways to capitalize on that peak. So I would push back first by saying that the idea that the younger they are, the more humble they are, I don't think that's consistent. I think it actually operates on a bell curve, on an upside down bell curve. It starts here, it dips, and then it goes back up to unrealistic levels. But the value goes this way, right? From the male perspective, perceiving the women, which is why we have to then go back to young men focusing on developing not just the physical, financial traits of him, but also the dispositional traits of him. The unfortunate part about that is men's character is built through adversity. Unless you see adversity early in life, for most men, it takes time. So by the time that he is even capable of being a him, he's had some experiences, he's done some things, he's seen some of the world. We're talking about when he's best case scenario, late 20s, average case scenario, early 30s, worst case scenario, 40s, 50s. And because of that, the idea of like getting married young doesn't work, right? Like we're even seeing videos of, men lamenting. There was a comedian talking about seeing his 18-year-old girlfriend in high school leave him for a 30-year-old. Because again, if we can see the fact that women are socialized, or there's even a biological incentive for them to look up, for them to strive for better. Young men, an 18-year-old man cannot compete with a 30-year-old man. From the perspective of what he can do for a woman, from the perspective of what our society, our capitalistic, vain society now celebrates as, he got to pay my bills, he got to buy me this purse, he got to take me here, do this. And unfortunately, women are being aware or becoming aware of these standards earlier and earlier in life. And the type of men who even have the disposition to bypass those standards are typically not the men across from them. They're the men beyond them in life. So then the marry young thing starts to fall apart because it only applies for the young dudes with charisma, with the type of charisma to compel a woman away from these ideals that society is forcing down her throat and selling her, and the echo chamber is reinforcing that this is what it means to live your life and be a bad bitch on a yacht in Dubai, all that good stuff. So that's where for me, and in our conversation, that's where for me it starts getting like tough, because as we continue to progress, it's only a smaller and smaller group of people who this approach could even remotely apply to.
Man, a lot to unpack there. A lot to unpack there. I'll start by conceding the point that there are some exponentially growing challenges.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I kind of rebut that objection with, well, what's the alternative? How is it working out otherwise? And if there are better alternatives, I'm open to exploring and examining those. So that's number one. What's the alternative? Number two, I just come from a framework of anything worthwhile is, worth a challenge. Okay. So, so like the way I respond to challenge is like, tell me what it's going to cost and let me decide if I'm going to pay the cost for that. And let me know, give me the information on all the alternatives of what it is. So like when we look at, the challenges of entrepreneurship or business versus working in corporate America, like I know I'm not cut off. Like I'm unemployable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like not unemployed, I'm unemployable. Like I wouldn't last at the job. I just, my value system and stuff like that, like, it wouldn't work for me. And so there are challenges that come from having that type of makeup. Like, I'm just not suited to work a job for somebody else. Okay, well, you got to go hunt. You got to go hunt. And okay, I'll accept the challenges that come along with that. So I think, there's always like, okay, well, look at the landscape and accept the challenges that are to you. Secondly, I'll say, what I wasn't offering that humility is lower at that time. To your point, like that reverse bell curve, that my point wasn't that women are more humble the younger they are. My point is they're more moldable. And the thing that makes them more, malleable in that time frame is you being her him, and you being her him is less about those physical distinctions. It's not excluded. It's not exclusive to that. It's not those physical distinctions of like your appearance and your financial stature, but to your point, the demeanor. And so that's why I go back to vision, right? You are exceptional and rare when you're a young man that already has dialed in vision. How many young men have dialed in vision early? And this is not something that requires tangible, I got my career, I'm making my money. Like you have a dialed in vision. And this is why I said, don't underestimate how powerful that is to move the human spirit. Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. It was aspirational. It was a vision of, and so even we could start, I got all these marketing books, behind me and everything. Marketing is nothing but human psychology. You understand marketing. I've studied marketing. And so even in understanding all movements, right? Russell Brunson talks about there's 3 elements to all movements, right? There's a charismatic figure, and charismatic in this sense doesn't mean charisma in the sense of what we're talking about, but it means somebody who has the ideals of the people they're leading. So there's a charismatic leader. There's a vision of a new future, right? A vision of something different, and then there's a new vehicle, right? There's a new vehicle.
Yeah.
So those are, Martin Luther King, right? I have a dream, and then the new vehicle is let's try nonviolent protests, right? Like civil rights. Let's try that, right? New vehicle. all movements have those three components. And so when you're that visionary, aspirational young man that has a clear vision, have things out there, you're not, wasting your 20s, you're going to exude something different. There's going to be externalities about you that most young men are just floating through life at that age. They're on life by default instead of by design, right? Life is happening to them, instead of for them. They're just floating along. Man, I remember being told when I was in high school, man, college is going to be the best days of your life. And that was terrifying to me. It was like, wait a minute. You mean I'm going to go from 18 to 22 or so, and the rest of my life, I live looking back like those are the good. And you see men that are this way.
Yeah.
These dudes are just, 40, 50 years old, can't wait to go back to homecoming to get their freak off and live the college days, or they in a, frat, grown men excited to go back because we got a new group online. You excited to go like beat on some boys? Like that's terrifying to me, right? And so, no, don't be down this path of just floating through life. This is going to be the best time. Let's party up. No, have early on a vision of what you want your life to be like, and then start to craft a plan, toward that. There's a lot of juice in there. There's a lot of unarticulable fabric that comes from making you different. You will seem different. And I think it's more of those, more of the things that are really tangible. We like to just like latch on to tactics, 1, 2, 3, I can write down. But it's so much that can't necessarily be taught, but it's got to be caught. And so I'm hoping that people can kind of catch what I'm saying. When you start working in some of those invisible realities that supersede the physical reality, your bank account, right? The money, the stuff that you wear, and certainly supersedes the virtual reality. That's you tapping into a different level of power of influence and molding and creating a following, right? Creating a culture that has a cult following. And so, you can absolutely have your woman follow you to a cult level leader. I say that in a non-toxic way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what's I think that's the challenge for two reasons. I think number one, I think in the past the pinnacle of the vision that drove men was legacy, right? I want to get married. I want to find a good woman so I can get married, so I can raise good children that will carry on my name in a way that will resonate for generations. However, I think as our species has advanced, I don't know if that's still the top of the pyramid in striving. I don't think so for men, and I don't think so for women either. So with that no longer being the light at the end of the proverbial tunnel, with us being more, hand to mouth, if you will, about how we experience and enjoy life, and long suffering is considered abuse. Delayed gratification is considered ridiculous, right? You could pay later and get it now, right? And more than that, with the I think one of the consequences of female empowerment is when it comes to mating and dating, women no longer have to really think practically. Like, women no longer have to think, what kind of husband will this man be? What kind of father will this man be? Because she has her job, because she has her education, because she can take care of herself, the primary thought is, how does he make me feel? And / how much fun do we have together? Which I think is really the core reason why, like, a lot of men complain about Pookies and the Ray Rays are the ones who get the women, or the street dudes, or the club promoters, etc. At the core of that I think is a consequence of female empowerment, essentially, Women no longer have to be practical about love, right? So with all those things being the case, we don't really strive for legacy the way we used to. The excitement is at a premium rather than purpose, because we're still unclear about purpose. And also, the fact that the in our community in particular, those young guys that you're referring to who have purpose early and who have vision early are usually the ones who get snatched up by the other community. Like those the guys we're seeing going, including Travis, the guys we're seeing going high in the draft, the guys we're seeing who become CEOs in their early 30s, when you see their partners, MKBHD is a good, example of that. When you see their partners, because of the disposition that they have, they went to MIT, they went to Brown, they went to Yale, they end up with a certain kind of woman because our community does not celebrate the type of man that you're describing and that they became at an early age. How do we then reconcile still idealizing this technology? And I'll get to that after your response. I'm going with that. that this technology that I think one could argue is no longer viable, or is no longer applicable to the modern realities.
Brother. Whew. Okay.
We're gonna do 30 more minutes.
A lot there.
We're doing part 2.
Nah. Hey, listen. I already told you. If you want to stream till next week, what I'm saying. I don't know how long YouTube let it stay on here. But you said a lot of very, very valuable and poignant items to address. And with all of it, the one thing that it was just ringing in my ear was that we advanced. And this is just a premise that really undergirds a lot of my different perspectives on a myriad of things, none less than the institution of relationships and marriage. Today, I don't think we're advancing. I think we've devolved. And that, again, undergirds a lot of, like, look back, and we're continuing to see more and more problems, but we think we're more and more advanced. We see more and more health problems, more and more rates of autism, but we're more advanced. Men today have lower testosterone levels than men 100 years ago, but yet we're so much advanced. Athletes are bigger, stronger, faster. Are they really? Are they really? I love track and field. It's such a pure sport. From point A to point B, who get there is the fastest. And we're measuring this with fully electronic timing systems that can break ties down to 1,000th of a second. So it's very little room for controversy.
Subjectivity, yeah.
Right? Like, controversy can happen sometimes, like false starts and things like that. But for the most part, it's not boxing. Like, nah, he really won that round. All the judges, no, that wasn't a foul. His foot, man, it's a bad call. What bad call is there in track? And I bring this up because, is Usain Bolt really the fastest man ever? So when you take into fact that they did an experiment with what's the Canadian sprinter, Andre DeGrasse, silver medalist that got second to Usain Bolt as a young man, right, in the 200 meters, where they gave him the same environment that Jesse Owens ran in. Well, they didn't run on a Mondo track surface that returns your energy, right? They ran on clay and dirt, cinder, packed down and compact. They ran on that. Oh, and they didn't have the Nike Max Flies that have a carbon plate in it, but they had heavy leather shoes that had metal spikes in them. Oh, and they didn't actually have starting blocks. They gave them little pick shovels, and they dug holes in the ground to put their feet in. So we're going to give you replica of those type of shoes, let you dig some holes, and we're going to time you in 100 meters. And this sub 10 100-meter sprinter that runs a 9 point whatever, world class, silver medal only to Usain Bolt, he ran in the 11s. So I'm giving you like physical examples that we can measure. This is not like subjective hypothetical. We can measure this of that day, higher testosterone levels, higher, the argument I'm making here is speed, right? All of these different, are we really evolving or are we devolving? Well, we think we're smarter than they are. Well, we might have access to more information, but our ability to synthesize information, do we really do that better than people 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago? Oh, do we really synthesize information better than they do? I don't necessarily think so. So this goes back to this undergirding principle I have of like, I think we really need to look back to the past, even in light of these challenges that we face today. Are we really advanced? Are we advanced if we're saying, oh, we've advanced past looking at wanting to leave legacy? That's not an advancement. That's a degradation. And so I say we need to do what we need to be approaching it of like, well, how do we contend with a world that no longer values things like legacy and purpose? How do we operate in this space? We don't. We try to get the space back to appreciating legacy and purpose. That would be my, answer or solution. and if that, and I know it's inconvenient, but answers to wide sweeping, huge problems that took a long time to get to rarely have convenient and easy answers.
Yeah.
It took you 20, 30 years to get obese, type 2 diabetes. No, like it's going to take you some time to work your way out of it. So if we want to like start thinking generationally, like, there's no 30-point shot. We're down at halftime. We're down by 30. We can come back, but we got to chip away at the lead. Like to think that, okay, we just going to make it all up. No. Hey, look, we got it. We got to come out the first couple minutes of the third quarter and just we got to have a good run. No point. We got to be tight on defense and chip away. Okay. And by the end of the third quarter, can we go into the fourth in some type of reasonable striking distance? Yeah. Can we go into the fourth down by 14? I'm still down by 14, but I can come back from 14 in the fourth. So my mindset being down by 30 at halftime can't be, what's the 30-point shot? There ain't no 30-point shot. So that's.
Yeah, I mean that just added another 30 minutes to this conversation because you just really brought up the concept of relativism, and I think one of the things that we have to reconcile as a species, this is bigger than just the male-female dynamic, but like advancement, you can make a very good argument, is very subjective. It's paradoxical, right? Because, for example, in ancient times in Africa, we had something called griots, right? They were the people who were assigned to hold all the history of a certain community. And now you can make the argument that people's ability or capacity to remember things that you told them 2 seconds ago is lower. There's also evidence now talking about how ChatGPT is affecting us as a species, like where our brain functions aren't as engaged as they used to be because we've offloaded that to ChatGPT. However, you could also make the argument that relying upon a human mind to retain and regurgitate consistently the same information for decades is counterproductive and counterintuitive and inefficient, particularly when we also understand the brain's ability to misrepresent things, misremember things. So what's actually more effective is having history written down in an objective way so we don't have to play telephone with another human mind. When we talk about lower testosterone rates, that's something that goes around a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with Derek Lewis. He's a MMA fighter. He's a heavyweight.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
He had his testosterone tested and his shit was low as hell. but he's also a heavyweight knocking niggas out, right? So I think from the testosterone standpoint, you could make an argument that Grandpa and them's testosterone had to be higher because they had to go to Vietnam, because they had to build skyscrapers, because they had to march into coal mines. And now, in addition to the consequences of the chemical pollution and the technology that we're inundated with, there's not as much utility for the type of testosterone that was necessary at that time in history, right? So it's this
not
catch-22
until it
of
is.
like, you know, it's a Faustian bargain. If you get this, you're gonna lose this. This is the cost, right? And part of, you know, a world where we care about feelings, a world where who you are on the inside matters, a world where um, women are not relegated to just nurturing. That world is not conducive for high testosterone men. And just like in any other species in nature, we adapt to our environment, right? So I would say whether we're talking about testosterone, whether we're talking about the laziness caused by technology, whether we're talking about women's disposition, whether we're talking about marriage, I think maybe advancement is the wrong is the wrong way to frame it or couch it. Maybe what's happening is just an adaptation, and there will be things gained from that adaptation. Like, I think people would agree that AI in some context is a net positive, but in other contexts, it's a net negative. And that's the case for coal. That's the case for oil. That's the case for fire when fire was discovered, right? But part of that human progress is like efficiency making us more lazy, efficiency and convenience making us less engaged, right? Like even driving now, people used to drive sticks and were connected to the car. But would we say that we would like to go back to everybody driving sticks, or do we enjoy the convenience of an automatic transmission where you don't have to think about too much? That's what we have to reconcile in this new generation.
Man, I want my 6-speed back. I had a 6-speed BMW. I miss shifting those gears. I'm getting another one. But that said, man, once again, so much to address there. The conveniences of the technologies and things of that nature, I beg the question that does that make us lazy, or does that create an environment that is more conducive for us to be lazy?
Absolutely.
So if I'm utilizing ChatGPT as a more efficient tool and it frees up bandwidth, that doesn't inherently make me lazy and have a lower memory. It does create an environment for me to more easily fall into that. But I could take this new freed up bandwidth because of the efficiency of the technology to think about more meaningful things and to have, like I utilize ChatGPT to help me unpack philosophical ideas. And it's just like prompting in it, even of itself. Some people have some of the laziest prompts. Like the technology is the technology. So even as we talk about the topic at hand here is marriage outdated technology, the technology is the technology. Like let's maybe evaluate how we're utilizing the technology, right? Like we could look at farming itself as a technology, right? Like agricultural people, like the ability to not have to be nomadic, but to be able to cultivate. Farming as a technology. The way we abuse the technology now, our soil is deplete of nutrients. Like I take a boron supplement, speaking of testosterone, our soil is boron deplete, and boron helps with your free testosterone, your accessible, available testosterone. So I take boron supplement, but we wouldn't draw a conclusion as, ridiculous to say farming is like an outdated technology. We look at like, okay, wait a minute, how are we not utilizing this technology maybe as with as much wisdom, right? And so that's where I think wisdom inserts itself into the conversation, and it's not always just tactful. right? Or tactical rather.
Mm.
Not always just tactical. There's other elements, and if we try to approach social human elements from a completely sterile, logical, standpoint, we're never going to reach the right conclusions. And so this is like some of my criticism and pushbacks on some of the conversation that looks to approach marriage from a strictly logical standpoint. That's in itself illogical, right? When you're trying to deal with human beings that, men say I'm logical, women are emotional. Like, no, it's not a binary, it's a spectrum. Like, how logical are we going to be, and how, much emotion we're going to have into it? Because any man on here is like, well, I'm logical. You're not 100% logical. Like, have you ever kissed a woman? There's no logical reason to put your tongue in another human being's mouth.
I mean, there is.
Huh?
There is. I could make that argument. There is.
There's a logical reason
to. I read somewhere that kissing, ironically, is like is a test of what is it called? Genetic compatibility, right? So, like you as two organisms are trying to figure out a way to work out if there is genetic compatibility, and one of the ways we go about doing that is kissing, and it kind of
so I'll remove it from a romantic swap of saliva standpoint. Mm-hmm. I gave my son kisses on his head earlier today. What logical reason is there for me to kiss my son on his head?
You can make an argument. you could make an argument like, that was you were socialized to, think of the physical manifestation of love, or of, in this way, and this how it manifests, because not all cultures show it that way. They have
for sure, and it still begs though the point that now if we're getting into social sciences of sociology, this is not just a sterile, logical, if-then statement, technology type of. There was a feeling associated, and we can scientifically talk about like even pair bonding of while we did home birth, and so when our children came out, they were skin to skin contact on me while the midwives attended to my wife, right? But there's if we try to just pretend as if human interaction is just a if-then statement, and we don't recognize the warm component, right? I call it the flame in the frame. The flame in the frame.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like the frame is the structure. It is the logic. So if you look at the word logos, right? Like the word logic itself, right? The etymology, right, is about word and reason, language. And so even as we communicate, like all intelligence, all logic is about communication. Mm-hmm. DNA is language, it's communication, right? What's happening on a computer right now is language, right? A genetic makeup is language, right? And so language is the tool of creation. But if you have language only, it's logic only, right? Logos, all of the ologies come from that root word logos: biology, sociology, epistemology, ontology, anthropology. These are all sciences. But if we're in a world that is just on logic only and misses the warmth of love, that's like just it's very empty and cold and sterile. But if you operate with only the flame, the part of me that felt a warmth when I kissed my son on the head, the part of my son that had a endorphin release and a dopamine, and there's an emotional, we can't deny that there was something emotional here that's not just just language based. But if we're driven by the flame only, well, what's a flame that doesn't have any type of framing around it? It's reckless, right? So if you see a world that is very, very predominantly driven by the flame of love, of feeling, which I would argue that's a lot of what our world is. Hedonic, do what thou wilt should be the whole, whatever it feels you got to do what makes you feel good. This is like the predominant nature. And so then the counter to that is like, yo, this is not logical. Like, let's evaluate the technology. And I'm offering that there's a blend of, there's a flame that needs to be encompassed with a frame. And we can't just approach this from frame only. You'll never get the right conclusions. And you can't just approach this from flame only. It can't be logic only. It can't be love only. We need those two, working together to draw the right conclusions.
No, 1,000%. And, I think that will be the unique struggle of our generation and generations moving forward. To quote one of your favorite guys, James Sexton, one of the things he says a lot during his interviews, he says, I don't know who the original quote is from, but he says, "I wish I knew no astronomy when stars came out." Right. And basically, part of the struggle of on a small level, the male female dynamic, on a large level, the human condition and us being, insatiable and just surviving on discontent, is the fact that we know too much, right? Magic is undiscovered science. And as much as we continue to learn more about the reality of the world, which in this context involves the reality of women, a lot of these magical, feelings-oriented, flame-oriented things that used to propel us, you like the metaphor, flame propel, used to propel us to seek legacy and to seek the vehicles to attain legacy, marriage being one of them. I think that's part of the reason why it's lost its luster. Like we know too much. We know too much about women. We know too much about human nature. We know too much about the economy. We know too much about what's going on in North Korea, right? So that anxiety you brought up earlier, that indecisiveness, I think it just continues to compound on itself. And I think it's only going to go in that direction. And I think because of that, prescriptive approaches or prescriptive recommendations like just marry young, just find a woman, I struggle to reconcile that with this new reality, because we can't just close our eyes. Like we've seen it. You've seen the nakedness. Even if you close your eyes, you know what it looks like. So how do boys in particular, and younger boys, like 16-year-olds are now more familiar with female psychology, if you will. And they have to now go into the world. They're virgins. Now go into the world understanding that women are not sugar and spice and everything nice. How do they navigate that when their grandpa didn't lose that luster, that magic until he was in his 40s? That's the challenge.
So I would beg different perspectives.
Okay.
I would beg different perspectives on some of the things. Noticing a lot of the conversation that we've had here tonight, there's been a lot of reframing, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, well, no, I wasn't saying, they're more humble. I'm saying they're more moldable. Oh, I'm not saying this. I'm saying that it's a lot of reframing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's not lazy, it's efficient.
Right. Right. And that's not like a mechanism of, performative. It's just like, as I'm listening and I'm absorbing what you're saying, this is actually communication taking place, the depth of communication that you facilitate in your environments, where it's like, oh, wait a minute. I can see we're using some of the same vocabulary, but not speaking the same language. Let me reframe. Right. And so, what I hear in this previous exchange here is a perspective that we know more.
Yeah.
And I would argue we know more of what doesn't matter.
Mm.
And we know less of the things that do matter. There's there's a quote that, something to the effect of, if I was the devil and I couldn't deceive people, I'd distract them.
Mm.
So as much as we know about, we know, I know everything that's happening over in, North Korea and Ukraine, and I know more about women, and I know more about this. How much do you know about self?
Mm. Right.
How much do you know?
Cost. That's the cost. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
so I, again, kind of going back to the conversation about efficiency, what is technology gives us efficiency and it makes us lazy. Well, it don't make us lazy, but it creates that opportunity for us to be lazy because it could make me more efficient. And then I have more time to think about the more meaningful things. I have the time to spend with self and go, have some introspection and really evaluate like, what is real? Like, what is my purpose? What does purpose even mean in the first place? Is there a difference between your purpose and your assignment? Like we always kind of frame purpose as what you're going to do, but is that really what purpose is? Do we even have these type of, conversations and challenges? So I think a lot of this is frame centered in how we evaluate stuff versus kind of flame centered. I think kind of philosophy, right? And we think of like philosophical ideas, theological ideas, stoicism, I think these are very meaningful areas, particularly for men, to start to look at purpose, assignment, and what do I mean? What do I stand for? Well, what are my values? Why is that a value?
Right.
Just continue to ask these type of questions. Yeah, we know a lot of stuff that really don't mean nothing.
Mm.
So that's the direction I would point us back in on the macro and the micro. This is one where macro and micro, collide, is on the macro and the micro, for us to really just say, like, what do we know? And challenge. One of the things that I admire and appreciate about you, and I feel like I shared as well, is, a sign of intelligence to me is that you're like very curious and even curious about your own ideas. Like, I'm speaking with confidence and conviction on my perspectives that I'm sharing here tonight, but I can guarantee you, I will go back after this and I'm going to scrutinize and examine and steel man, your positions and strong, like
100%.
right. We're going to do that. And so the more we exercise that on the actual meaningful things, like, okay, if I understand women's nature, okay, men know women's nature more. Like, okay, but why? What's the root? What's the like? Where did that like really come from? And not just right now with this individual woman and situation, but just women overall. And what about women throughout millennia? Like, is there some common threads there? How, what does that mean? Right? And these are like some deeper philosophical things that I think have a lot of value in exploring, that will actually kind of, I think, get us to, more of the solutions.
Let me ask you this, because you bring up an interesting paradigm when you talk about framing things. What do you think, for the men listening, what do you think is the most productive way to frame, or the direction to go in framing the popular 50% divorce rate, 70% initiated by women? Where do you think that, or how do you think men should conceptualize that better?
One, understand that it's not even accurate on the 50% part, right? Here's a framing that I would say is like, okay, one, I'm always curious when there's something that is commonly known that's actually not known. It's like, that's not even a fact, right? This is not probably the best example, but like separation of church and state, right? It's like nowhere in the Constitution. But if you're like man on the street interviews, most people would say that. Now, I say it's not the best example because I do admit and understand that there can be a concept that is present without those words being present. And but even the concept that most people have is, the church can't say something. No, the separation of church and state says that the there won't be any state-sponsored churches, but it doesn't say that any institution like a church couldn't make an influence on the state. It doesn't. That's not what it means. So this idea, but most people will walk around and say, Constitution says separation of church and state. It's not even a real fact. So likewise, like 50% divorce rate, 50%, you hear it so much, it's not even a fact. It's actually closer to about 35%, right? Now, what is closer to 50% is the failure rate of businesses by year 5. So from a reframing, business is very in vogue. Starting a business is more in vogue now than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Everybody got entrepreneur in their profile. So I reframe that with, right. You know what I'm saying?
Everybody will pop the balloon, yeah.
Right. So they got 5 businesses.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? So marriage divorce rate at 10 years is about 35 to 40%. So not even at 50%, where the business failure rate at 10 years is 65%. But my friend James Sexton would never say, I don't understand why we would still use a technology that has a 65% divorce, failure rate. He doesn't say that about business, and nobody would. People still aspirational about business. And the framing they have in going into it is like, wow, if 65% of businesses fail by year 10, what is it about the 35% that don't fail? Let me study that, because I'm still attracted to business. And so I think by mere fact that we still had these conversations about relationships and marriage, the fact that men are still getting married, even if it's not at the same rates, men still want to be with women. All right, come on. All right, what are we talking about? Men still want to be with women. Men still want to have children. They still do want to have legacy. I think we would want to examine philosophically, what is that force that's trying to push away from that? What's the invisible force? Why is there such an attack on distracting, distorting, and deceiving us? Distracting, distorting, and deceiving us to not want to be together, because I don't believe that we were designed to go on this journey alone. I like to go to extremes to test things sometimes, right? Like, okay, if I'm saying this is better than that, if everybody did this, what would happen? If everybody did that, what would happen? I know that could be, flimsy, and there could be problems with that, but it's a good test to start. If everybody just got married and had a nuclear family, if everybody did that versus everybody just had a promiscuous lifestyle that did whatever, or nobody married, like, what would be our outcomes?
Yeah.
So, like, on the extreme from being in community versus being alone, let's look at extremes. You ever heard somebody talk about being in solitary confinement? How quickly their mind just deteriorates and, really goes to a inhumane level. So isolation, being by yourself, we're not designed, versus, the other end of community. So again, if I was the force of opposition and I couldn't deceive people, I distract them. So I would deceive them by thinking they're in more community, even though they're more isolated. Through social media and online. I got all these thousands of followers, and you are depressed because you're actually alone. You're in isolation. And so we are designed to be together. And so again, the reframing, what's the reframing? Well, if 35%, let's call it 40%, we'll go with the higher number, 40% of people are divorced by year 10, what is it about the 60% when they are successful? Well, what if I told you that, the less sexual partners you have before you got married increases your divorce rate? Virgins, when they're married, after 5 years, the divorce rate is about 5 to 6%. Versus if you had 10 plus partners, it's at 35%. Right? Or what about familial involvement in your mate selection? If you have both spouses active, families involved in their mate selection, if it's like arranged marriage, it's like 4 to 10% divorce rate. And if there's like mutual choice but family input, which is what I'm advocate of, it's 10 to 20% is a divorce rate. So like, why am I not studying the fact that, hey, people who have a faith-based marriage have a 20% divorce rate versus completely, non-religious people have a 50 to 60% divorce rate. So now when I start stacking these things, I don't look at a statistic like, as my friend James Sexton tries to frame it, if there's a 50%, 50% divorce rate, then when I get married, I'm 50% likely to get divorced, as if I have no factors, like I don't control any of the factors for that. If the average 3-point shot percentage of players in the NBA is 30-some%, that doesn't mean that Steph Curry's shot has to be the same percentage. And he can take factors, his own training or whatever the case is, to shift the odds in his favor.
Sure.
So, having familiar involvement with your mate selection, and from a faith-based standpoint, the reasons behind it, the studies that show into it are about you being actively involved in something. So because it has a shared moral framework. So when we start to have issues, we have something outside of ourselves that is a shared framework that helps us resolve things. So I'm not looking to force a religion on anybody, but you having similar worldviews matters. Right? Having a greater community for support, that matters. Built-in conflict resolution norms, that matters. Structured time together, that matters. Right? So if you have all these elements, right, I'm going to reduce the amount of partners that you have, before you got married, have familiar input, going back to my point earlier that I don't believe we're suited to vet for ourselves. Right. And you have, all of these different, worldviews that are bring you together to have structured ways of resolving conflict. What's the divorce rate in those scenarios? How much time do we spend studying? Okay, the divorce rates, whatever it is, or 35%, 50%. Okay, the ones that do make it, how do we study that? Because that's how we approach business. Oh, 65% of businesses don't make it to year 10. Okay, well, what about the 35% that do? Well, I want to play. I want to be a professional athlete. Well, most people don't make it pros. Most people don't even go D1. Okay, I got it. Just tell me the odds. Tell me what it takes, and let me decide it out. I want to go D1. So to go D1, what does it look like? What do you have to do? Well, if you're going to go D1, it's going to take this. It's going to take that. Okay, cool. I'm going to take my odds to be one of the 1%. Because what's the alternative? To not go D1 and not have my dream, not have a shot at my dream. So what's the alternative of us giving up on the technology of the Institute of Marriage? I think we're seeing that. And on both ends, both men and women, I don't think that people are happier in their community, happier in their relationship situation. I think the evidence is quite clear. Men aren't happy with it. Women aren't happy with the outcome and the result. So instead of throwing away the technology, saying we don't need farming, no, maybe we need a different type of farming that doesn't deplete the soil. Maybe we just use the technology different.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it so complex, because I think it's multiple things that affects it. I think like we haven't even touched on the economics, right? Like there was more of an economic incentive to even aspire to marriage back in the day than there is now. We joke sometimes about how grandpa on a factory salary was able to afford a house, afford to take care of 5 kids, and afford to take care of his side family at the same time, his side kids and his side woman down the street. So him getting married wasn't as big of a hurdle, as big of a sacrifice, or as big of a deal as it is now, where like there isn't even available real estate, and for the real estate that is available, it's priced way out of what's reasonable. The interest rates are out the roof. The salaries aren't really going up. So some of those things, in addition to now the disposition that the women who used to be the sweetener of this deal have taken on, it starts disincentivizing it. And I mean, to your point about these numbers, that 50% also includes people who've been married before, right? People who've been divorced multiple times. It also includes military personnel who marry frivolously. For anybody who knows people in the military, they be getting married to get a check, So, I mean, although I think that stuff is important, it still is something we have to dialogue around, because we gonna have to. My position is this. My position, I think marriage should be one of the hardest things to get into, but the easiest thing to get out of. I think that part of the reason why the divorce rate is as high as it is because there are a lot of people getting married who have no business getting married.
I would agree with that.
You know, in your position, which is something I would actually co-sign, like there should be some your mom has to sign off on it too. You know what I'm saying? Your community, your pastor has to sign off on it too before y'all walk down the aisle. Y'all can't just go to Vegas, right? Like there have to be genetic testing to make sure you guys are even genetically compatible. There has to be psychological testing to make sure, you know what I mean? So by the time, and which is part of the reason I appreciate James Sexton, because his whole thing about like talking about the prenups is, if you can't even have a conversation about the prenup, y'all don't need to be getting married.
I would 100% agree with. And so this is the framing, and these are the type of conversations that I find more intriguing, more valuable. Is okay, well, how do we address it? We'll come back and do a part 2 about the economics, because that's an area that by all means is very different now. We have to like really look at. I'm gonna address that last comment that was up there about the Christian thing, but I want to stick on this point here about the help me out. What were you just saying? I'm thinking about the Christian thing now.
The economics of it.
The economics of it, yeah. I forget. So I'll go to that Christian point. So again, I was very intentional using my words about like having faith-based involvement and activity together, because Christian divorce rate is the same. But my question would be like, what's a Christian? The Christian divorce rate amongst people who just say they're Christian. I mean, the video we started with, and I'm very delicate, when somebody starts going on that arc, particularly certain archetypes of women that had a certain background, and now they're all of a sudden they found religion and Christian, right? So I'm very mindful of the dynamics that can exist there with them. Now their level of I'm Christian, but I also simultaneously don't want to I don't know what's in somebody's heart. Okay, right. So it's kind of disarming for them to say that. But with all that said, anybody can say they're Christian. B. Simone Christian, like Travis Hunter wife Christian. Like, so my argument wasn't Christians.
Yeah,
I don't even know what a Christian is. Ask 10 Christians what Christian means, you'll get 11 answers. So there was a Harvard study in 2016 that found that couples who attended religious services together weekly are 47% less likely to divorce than those who don't. So it really points out that like active practice matters more than belief alone. Just anybody just says they're Christian. The rappers, you know what I'm saying, that got the
I want to thank God.
This to the third. I want to thank God, right? Like so. So it's about your activity of some type of faith-based involvement that brings your family together. So that was the point that I was making there. But man, yeah, on the economic side of things, these are this is the framing of like how do we address those type of conversations? But that only comes from if we feel like the institution is valuable. So when my wife and I were more active in coaching, couples, one of the frameworks that we got from Mark Gungor, author, speaker, pastor, Mark Gungor does a lot of great relationship content. He says, you have to be coming from a place where you're working on your marriage because it's valuable, not to make it valuable. Right. So some people are like, they don't see the value in their marriage anymore, and they want to work on it so it will be valuable. You have to come from the framework that, no, it is valuable. That's why I need to work on it. So if we already start from a premise that before macro is marriage is no longer valuable. Let's work on it. That's different than saying, no, marriage has been. This is, I think that we can say this factually, even if we don't necessarily maybe feel this right now inside. Marriage has been historically, over space and time, anywhere in the world, has been the cornerstone of community, which has been a cornerstone of creating societies. That has been the case for all of human history. And so there is some historical value to that. And so if it has been valuable, despite of what it looks like right now, maybe before we throw in the towel on it, let's see if there's ways for us to help it and address it, because it is valuable, not to make it valuable.
Sure. How would you reconcile the, I think, more important part of that stat that the vast majority of the initiants are the women? And, as we talk about just human discontent and, the popular phrase of, or the popular, I guess, cultural movement of women trying to find their happiness and the rest is still unwritten and all that good stuff. 70% of these divorces are initiated by women. What's a more helpful frame?
Yeah. And that actually brings back to mind what it is that I was going to, discuss, is that that idea of the 70% of women that are initiating the divorce is the mate selection. I think a lot of it starts with the mate selection part of it. And so when you initially said marriage should be one of the hardest things to get into and the easiest thing to get out of, my innate reaction is, because I'm like so pro marriage, my innate reaction is like, no, I want to get more people married. But then when I just like actually sit in it and like, okay, Jane, like, why are you having this response? These types of ideals that I'm saying of like, no, go introspection, right? So when I start questioning myself, like, why do you have this type of response? And then through start unpacking it, I actually, I really agree with that, if you make it more difficult to get into through mechanisms like familial involvement, right? Through, mechanisms, like, hey, listen, you need to be chased beforehand. You like whatever fits your worldview, and you actually giving very intentional thought that's worthy of the decision that you're making about like how you're going to address marriage, about how you want your life to be, about vision. You're going back, to the vision conversation. Like, these are things like, how many people that get married at any age are really thinking about it in terms of like, have a really dialed in vision of what they want their life to look like, what they want their marriage to look like, beyond the surface level of, I want 2 or 3 kids, I want my wife to look good, or what, like, beyond some surface level stuff, like, what do you want the texture of it to be like? So from a familial involvement standpoint, like for us, our standard is very simple. Like, it's not arranged marriage. Like, we're going to go select your mate, but you will not get married without the approval, like, of us vetting that person and knowing it. And so even reframing how we approach it, how do we use this technology? The common thread and idea is, I'm just going to teach you about marriage, and then you go off, find somebody, select them on your own, and then bring them to us for some formality of meeting. That's not any real true vetting. You've already had sex with this person. It's like you try to meet somebody's parent like early on. It's like, oh, we ain't that serious. You trying to meet my folks? We ain't that. So the implication is, let's get super close, have sex, get that attached to where now you, even if I give you feedback now, you're too connected to this person, you're not gonna listen to me.
Too late, yeah.
Like, my daughter at 16 years old, she knows at this point, like, yo, at the moment that a young man expresses interest in you beyond anything that's platonic, like, bring me the boy. He wants your number, like, and I ain't gonna be on some Martin Lawrence and Will Smith type of thing at the door, whatever. But
yeah,
like, and I need to know the pedigree and the stock. Like, people who breed dogs care more about the pedigree of like, before I, have my bulldog with that bulldog. Like, I want to bully. What's the pedigree? They care more about the pedigree of a dog than they care about the pedigree of who their children are going to be with. You met the other family at the rehearsal dinner, and we're wondering why things are. If we view it, Frank, how do we reframe it? Maybe we reframe marriage as a family merger more so than just two people getting married. And so to address maybe some of the economic challenges that come along with this, why are we coming together to have a party for the weekend? And then after that, all right, good luck. Y'all on your own.
Yeah.
Versus we have two families where if husband and wife are further in life and more stable, and husband and wife are further in life and more stable, and we have similar worldviews and similar backgrounds, and not identical, nobody's identical, but at least we have some frameworks where that couple, they came from a home that this is how we address and handle conflict. Oh yeah, that's kind of similar how I saw my folks do it. These are type of things that are going to make a difference in, well, my family, they just yelled at each other, but then everybody, was cool. Well, my family, I never saw people yell at each other. So now we're 7 years into the marriage, and anytime you yelled, I interpreted it like it was an issue, but you yelled and you didn't think it was a big deal because that's the environment you grew up in. We didn't know our families were that way because our families didn't meet until the rehearsal dinner, and they just partied that weekend, and they ain't talked since then. Right. So anyway, these are the the elements that would help frame it as a family merger. And these two families can help this new couple, even economically, where, if either one of these families have businesses and the young man and the young woman can work inside of that family business or put them onto a job or whatever the case is. And we start taking more of a communal approach to this family, this new family unit versus individuals. I think that'll help address a lot of issues.
I don't know if you've heard of this book, Is Marriage for White People? I think apparently it's like the basis of a lot of the Ralph Richard Banks. It's the basis for a lot of the divestment movement. And unfortunately, I think that's the challenge that our community in particular is going to have, because a lot of the foundationary elements that are necessary to conceptualize marriage as a merger are elements that we as a community don't have in spades, right? Like a lot of the boys are coming from single mother households. A lot of the girls are coming from boss, B households, and brokenness is our norm. Like, romance aside, like there've been stats coming out about even family reunions are down. Like, people aren't even getting together with family anymore, right? So there are a lot of, I think, the relationship deterioration we're seeing in our community is really just a consequence of just our community's deterioration. Like, we don't like each other, we don't trust each other. And naturally, men don't trust women and women don't trust men, because from the perspective of the Black community, we're the furthest two ends of that spectrum, right? And I think oftentimes, because we get too caught up in the bickering, we don't really zoom out to see the bigger picture of, like, the real problem is men don't like Black women, and Black women do not like Black men. And until we can get to the place where we actually like each other and can then conceptualize merging our proverbial companies with each other, because there has to be some level of trust, some level of I enjoy the company. Even we're going into business, like, most of us aren't going to go into business with somebody we don't at least feel like we can talk to, right? And unfortunately, we're so fractured at this point. And I think that actually the 70% divorce rate is part of that, because I don't think it means that the discontent is on the female side 70% of the time. I think women file, right? I think there are a lot of men who, if they were a woman, they would file, but we don't feel like we have the right to have discontent. We feel like we need to be accountable to the vows that we made, unlike women who feel or who have more latitude, right? To, you know, if a man dresses like a woman, he's gay. If a woman dresses like a man, she's a tomboy. Women have more latitude in the paradoxical nature of human expression than men do. So, you know, when I see certain stats like that, part of that nuance is, you know, we really have to get to the core of Black men and women don't like each other. And because of that, we don't trust each other. And because we don't trust each other, the best we can do is compartmentalize ourselves to physical relationships. And until we can rebuild that trust through these conversations, through the curiosity you mentioned earlier, because that's one thing that I've been trying to really facilitate is that curiosity of like, you don't see the world the way that I do, but I'm curious and I'm fascinated by the way that you see it, because I don't feel super, and it's another point you made about like the ability to steel man and straw man your own bullshit and other people's bullshit. I don't feel married, pun intended, to the way that I view the world. And I'm curious about the way that you view the world. I see value in the difference in the way that you view the world as a woman that could be beneficial to me. And I think that until we can start moving in that direction, the marriage prescription might be premature. You know, we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with,
Yeah.
and I certainly, like you, I care more about getting it right than being right. And if more of us, you know, can adopt that framework, you know, that'd be helpful. And I think beyond Black men not liking Black women and Black women not liking Black men, I think we don't like ourselves.
That's right.
Really,
that's
we get
real.
deep down to it. And so we do understand that in conversation, in debate, in sales and negotiation, if we have logic that is opposing, we have words, we have communication that's opposing, one of the good places to start is where do we agree? And I think we all collectively can agree that we don't like the current state of the outcomes.
Yeah.
Whether you're a divestor, whether you're a passport bro, whether you're Black man, Black woman, we don't like the current state of where things are. So like we do have some common ground there, and unpack, you know, and start figuring out like, why don't we like it? But it's from a genuine curious place versus a blame play. Well, I don't like it because women are foul 70% of the time. And I don't like it because he's being a broke this. No. Like, let's have more of an intellectual conversation of like, why don't we like it? And that's where a platform like this and the work that you're doing is actually facilitating like actual meaningful conversation. Because while the drive for me is to recognize how far off we are, I'm encouraged by the fact that when people do actually get a chance to really hear a lot of these messages about a vision, about something aspirational, about wait, it can be different. I have a dream, right?
Yeah.
A new vehicle could usher in a different type of reality. You cannot underestimate the power of how that drives people. Particularly when we all agree we're discontent with how it is. And, you know, may not get there with you. Like, it might not happen in a generation. There's no 30-point shot. But if we can just start cracking away at, you know, fathering the unfathered through these type of conversations, don't underestimate the 16-year-old man that he's like, oh, wow, like I'm in an environment where I see all my aunties and uncles, like I see he got 3 baby mamas and daddies and nobody's married. And I don't want that. And I just thought the only solution was, marriage ain't it. But wait a minute, I stumbled across this clip on We Need to Talk, and wow, that sounds a little, I haven't heard anything like that. I'm intrigued by it. I'm curious. I don't think we can underestimate the power of the aspiration, the vision on, wait a minute, maybe it's the technology of marriage, maybe, but we have been marrying for like years. So maybe it's not farming that's the issue. Marrying, that's the issue. Maybe it's how we're farming, how we're marrying. Maybe we need to, I've never heard this before. It sounds brand new. Like, what? Like turning over your soil so you don't completely deplete the nutrients? That's not a new concept. It's actually a healthy concept that we've always used. It's just because of the commercialization nowadays that's a new invention of why we farm that way now. It's a new invention of why we do marriage this way now. And that is why it's breaking down. Oh, well, I actually never knew that there was former ways that had some problems and limitations. Well, yeah, like let's use our ingenuity on how to address those problems and limitations of the economic, challenges and things of that nature, because farming is valuable, because marriage is valuable, not to make it valuable.
Man, that's a good place to keep it, man. That's a bar right there. Listen, I feel like the next one we got to really go into the male loneliness epidemic, as far as like the reality of it, and also like the propaganda around it, and also the happy single propaganda we're seeing coming from the female delegation. I think that'll be a good part 2 or episode 2, if you will.
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
think
brother.
any
final words, man? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I think it's connected, and I'll go ahead and take the final words again. Start with just gratitude, man, for facilitating this conversation.
Appreciate
not just
you,
here on this stream, facilitating this conversation, but also just overall with your platform. And as kind of a segue from this to the next conversation, again, if the driver is about like, we're not happy with the state of society overall. It reminds me of the adage of the man that looks to seek to change the world. And he's like, man, it's changing the world. After 10 years of trying to change the world, it's hard stuff. You know what? I'm going to just change my nation. My nation could use a lot of help in changing it. So he spends the next 10 years to change his nation. And that doesn't work. So he's like, well, I just changed my city or my state or whatever. And so another 10 years doing that. Well, maybe I can make some impacts in my just local community. He's getting up in age now. Spends another 10 years to do that. And then on his deathbed, he's looking around at his family and he's realizing like, wait a minute, if I first could have like made an impact and changed my family, then maybe we could have changed our community. And if we'd have changed our community, then we could have changed our city and state, and that could have changed the nation, and that could have affected the world. But before you even change your family, you got to first change yourself. And so as we have these marriage conversations and relationships, and black men don't like black women and black women don't like black men, the reality is I think a lot of us really don't like ourselves. And the answer to the outward problems is often inward. And so we need to go inward and do the inner work, because the more inner work you do, the more your outer reality will improve. And so I look forward to the next conversation about unpacking the introspection and the things inside of ourselves that, we deep down really don't like, particularly as men, that's leading to the male loneliness epidemic and all those different things. But, it starts with going inward, and there's a lot of riches inside for us to unpack. So again, appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Appreciate you, man, lending us your time, your wisdom, man. Appreciate it. Every time we chop it up, man, my head hurts, but I feel like my brain grew a little bit. So it's a net positive, man. Appreciate you, brother.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Have a good night, man.
You too.
All right. All right, everybody. That is the end of this impromptu stream. Again, shout out to Mr. James Penn Jr. I'm thinking we might make this more consistent thing if he has the time or the energy. Because just the image, in my opinion, of two black men sharing thoughts, diving into some of these more abstract, nuanced, esoteric, even parts of some more frivolous conversations that happen on the internet, I think is beneficial. I think is valuable as well. It's valuable for me as the person participating, and I hope it's valuable for those of you listening and watching. Again, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Stay tapped into the channel. I'm trying to ramp back up or ease back into being a content creator again. The day ones who continue to show up and continue to support, I appreciate you guys more than you know. Consider joining our Patreon. Consider becoming a member. Consider donating if you can. But yeah, stay tuned. I got some more stuff coming. Appreciate you guys. Have a good evening.